Yo everybody, hey, it's me and Buster Green. Sorry I haven't made a video in a minute. I've been kind of burned out and it's been a rough summer. Alright, so after a long weekend, this weekend I saw the new How to Train Your Dragon remake, which is barely better than the original, although I wouldn't say it's directly worse like any of the recent Disney remakes. It's still not completely worth watching if you enjoyed the animated movie more. I also briefly checked out Monster the movie, which is insanely tonally imbalanced. And finally this weekend I watched the entirety of Bet, aka Kakegurui, but it's instead turned into a Riverdale-like Netflix soap opera show. It's kind of like Wednesday. It's kind of like they took my horny gambling anime and turned it into one of those stupid Netflix soap operas set in a paranormally influenced American high school where people with extreme personalities clash, fuck, and murder each other while screaming the lyrics to emo bands that your dad might barely remember. I put out a video a while back announcing my overall horror to the general existence of the show, but I guess this is a light apology / retraction on that video because while the show is every bit the Netflix trash show you would expect it to be, it's not the worst thing ever either, as it does bring one or two interesting ideas to the table. So I'm going to split this review into a good side first and a bad side afterwards. Now stand by and I guess I'll run this video long, and at the end I'll rank up all the disparate elements of the American show from best to worst later, but in the meantime, let me talk about why I have some hope for the show. In terms of where it overall ranks with the anime to cringe Netflix American movie pipeline, it's definitely doing the whole, this is the story you know, but now it's set in America. You know, that trope that they established in the Netflix Death Note. I want to say in a couple of ways, it does it better than Death Note though, although that's mostly due to it having 10 half-hour episodes against Death Note's equivalent 3 half hours in a movie runtime. At the same time, it's not as faithful as Netflix One Piece, and it makes a lot of the same tone-deaf character revisions as Netflix Cowboy Bebop, but I want to say the main thing that probably puts the show in a more comfortable and better space than those shows is its seeming willingness to go off the rails. While it's no doubt a bad live-action Kakegurui as expected, I can say firstly, and at least in my opinion, yes, I have an opinion, I have one, that it's somehow superior to the Japanese live-action adaptation. Alright, so here's my hot take. The Japanese live-action adaptation, that version is basically pointless. There's no reason to watch it. It lacks the artistic flair of the anime, and if anything, it's a retelling of the story for children not allowed to watch the level of violence in the anime, which is kind of funny. The acting is stiff and lifeless, and it overall lacks the stakes and tension that made the anime what it was. The main thing the JLA, Justice League of America, has above the ALA is that it is generally doing an accurate depiction of the plots, characters, and costumes originally depicted in the Kakegurui manga, which I happen to know some people care quite a lot about. So if your main gripe is they got the costumes wrong, that no one's Japanese, the Japanese live-action series exists. It has cosplay-accurate costumes, it has completely accurate characters and plot lines, but it's just an inferior product to the anime because it doesn't deliver the tension and the thrills and all the like weird sweaty spit on everyone that the anime is so covered in. To that matter, yes, by and large, the American series definitely failed on the costume department, on the character department, and the plot lines are insane, but I want to say it at least does reach the tension and the thrills of the anime in maybe one or two places that the Japanese live action never got close to. And for that reason, it's better than the Japanese live action adaptation, which had very bland acting and seemingly no stakes to the life and death games of chance depicted within. Let me just dwell on my honest hopes for how the show could be good. There's basically two moments in the entire course of the show where it's good. And ironically, classically, it's the beginning and the end. The beginning scene of the first episode is good, and the last episode ends on a relatively good note, which is, typical for your season finales. So the opening to the show, honestly, is the scene that has the most promise over anything in the show because they haven't had a chance to fuck it up yet. But it does show the lingering untapped potential of the show that transplants Yumiko Jabami, this anime psychopathic protagonist, this constantly orgasming anti-hero of the original Kakegurui anime, and drops her in the cliched detention setting of the 1980s high school movie The Breakfast Club. The show basically lives, breathes, and dies on Miku Martineau's surprisingly on-point depiction of Yumiko, depicting her with the proper level of unhinged that I feel the Japanese live action failed to reach in its energy. Maybe they just felt embarrassed to go there, seemingly out of the weirdness that Yumiko is such a horny, insane character that, any actress would feel embarrassed doing that. But in failing to reach that in the Japanese live action version, they effectively nuked the show and made it pointless. Bet at least properly knows that the main thing that kept the original Kakegurui compelling was Yumiko being an absolutely unhinged sexual tyrannosaurus with no clear ability to predict her motives, her moves, or why the fuck she was doing anything. Although she does change her emotions at such a breakneck pace in the American adaptation that if you diagnosed her as bipolar or having some other mental illness, that would be a tough argument to deal with. The show does, however, kneecap Yumiko's feminine mystique by shooing her into a very cliche soap opera plotline that her parents were killed and she needs revenge. So she's going to murder everybody. She's out to kill everything and kill everyone and kill the thing that killed her parents. And anything that's related to that thing that deserves it too. And it seems like the target changes perspective and scope throughout the course of the show, where she thinks it's one guy and then it turns out it's another guy, and then she kills a guy at the end of the show who may or may not have done it. It seems like he probably didn't do it. But back to that opening scene, I think that's the best scene in the entire show because it just gives us Yumiko Jabami. It gives us her before the show unfortunately kind of ruined her with this dumb revenge plotline. And on top of that, it gives us something new to chew on. Yumiko in the Breakfast Club, as dumb as an opening as that is, it presents us with an uncompromised Yumiko Jabami terrorizing your average random American high school. And fuck God, was that cool to see. Unfortunately, that scene really undercuts the premise immediately by showing how OP Yumiko is against normal human beings in the normal world. Yumiko is faced with these average low IQ, low energy high schoolers and teachers who are completely decimated in the path of her revenge. Yumiko being one of the most OP anime females of the last decade, she immediately gets expelled from this normal high school and is sent off to St. Dominic's prep school, where her weird but framed as clever scheme all along wanted her to go so she can go up against all the Kakegurui anime rejects and go into those stupid stories you already know, up against these butchered and sausage, weird mixed up pale imitations of their Japanese originals, or alternatively, actors who just didn't understand the characters they were supposed to play, so they turn into a big pile of human chaos. Now, I'll get into the middle of the show later, but I will say if you're a casual Kakegurui fan who just wants to give this one a chance, I would say consider watching at least the first episode and the last episode, because the first episode sets the stakes, and then the last episode goes off the rails, which is what I was waiting for all along. The last episode goes off the rails, presenting your cliche soap opera season finale where they basically completely abandoned the premise of Kakegurui and just put everyone in a standard soap opera cliche that everyone went to a vacation at a log cabin together and there was a murder. And also, as it turns out, some of the parents are Russian gangsters randomly. So Yumiko ends up accidentally killing a man who accidentally knew the secret whereabouts of her possibly now alive mother, who up to now they had established died in a seemingly airtight car explosion. I guess what I'm getting at is I honestly kind of prefer this for the show. I think the show only really works when it's going off the rails, but I have to stress that it needs to go off the rails in the right way. It can't just go off into crapland like Cowboy Bebop did. I think the one thing that's making me sick with all these remakes is, what's the fucking point really? It's just How to Train Your Dragon, but live action, same story with no risk or embellishments. Just watch the original. Then we have Lilo and Stitch, where it sodomizes the original story to tell relatively the exact opposite story. I'm not sure who the fuck that is for, but just watch the original. And then we also had Snow White, where committees and revisionists have choked the original story to death. So yeah, just watch the original. Bet, however, it's at its best when it's trying to diverge from Kakegurui. Like, as much as I love Kakegurui, the anime's long finished and long closed down in my mind. It's a finished story. I don't think they'll ever be making any more of it. While I never quite fully understood Yumiko's deal in the anime, I did feel that she had fully dominated and fully run her feet all over the various pompous and evil characters in Gambling High School and put them all to shame. And honestly, that ending to the anime is honestly what's maybe making me crave seeing Yumiko's next interesting adventure. Where does she go from there? Unfortunately though, Kakegurui was only followed up by Kakegurui Twin, a lackluster no-stakes prequel showing the backstory of episode 1 villain Mary Satome. Kakegurui Twin was kinda only worth watching for the music, as otherwise Mary Satome is just not a good protagonist. She's too stupid, she's too evil, she's too short-sighted, and there's really no point in rooting for her when you know she's just ultimately going to run up against Yumiko and get destroyed. I never fully watched the Japanese live-action version because it just seemed to be so inferior to the anime story, and it had none of the sex and the violence, which made the anime interesting. Nonetheless, I actually did watch all 10 episodes of Bet. While they didn't hold a candle to the Kakegurui anime, it did surprise me by going to a few genuinely dark, genuinely insane, genuinely stupid places, and in terms of sheer interestingness, it at least surpassed the Japanese live action by keeping me guessing and keeping me on my toes. I guess Bet did good enough to justify a second season, and for that second season, my single and only wish is that they move the show further away from Kakegurui. Just give me Yumiko Jabami running nuts in America. Because I do now consider Miku Martino to be the definitive live-action Yumiko Jabami, so just let her solve her boring-ass Twin Peaks parents' murder, and then roll on to a crazy new American adventure. Like, my dream for how the show could go or could end would be they just completely abandon doing the Kakegurui presence and just show us what this version of Yumiko does on a single week in Las Vegas. Does she become the richest human on Earth? Does she burn the city to the ground? Does she become intrinsically linked to the local mafia? Maybe she kills them all because this Yumiko kills people. Again, I want to see a new adventure for adult Yumiko in America, and the show can potentially give me that. So if it will just take the fucking training wheels off, stop trying to butcher the original story. I feel like the showrunners for the show are so uninterested in the source material anyway that they had to butcher it this badly, so I say fuck it all then. Just free Yumiko and let her have a unique new adventure in America that is worth my time. Almost everything in the show can be relatively predicted by me sort of remembering how the original anime went, and that's stupid. Just do some new shit with it. I don't think Bet is an outright disaster like Cowboy Bebop or Death Note before it, but it's definitely too far from the source material to be an outright crowd pleaser like Netflix One Piece was. But I at least think they got Yumiko right, and that gives this show awesome potential. If they can just send Yumiko to a decent place to a new adventure, the show can actually be saved. It definitely needs stronger writers, but at the same time, I do sense that the core part of the show is seemingly trying to break out of its shell and be its own thing. And I guess if they get there, great. However, if the show immediately gets canceled after I put this YouTube video out, I hope at the very least Miku Martino becomes the next Jenna Ortega on the heels of this stupid show, because that girl should win a goddamn Emmy for all the stupid shit the show put her through. Alright, so now here's the negative part of the video where I dunk on what didn't work through episodes 1 to 9. And yeah, basically everything except Yumiko doesn't work. So here's a big fat list of everything, and then I'll use strategic video editing to rank it. Ryota Suzuki, the show's do-nothing narrator character, has been turned into Ryan Adebayo. He's basically the same character in every possible way, so I give him a special award for being a good adapted character. I would even argue that in some ways Bet uses him better than the original Kakegurui because they seem to be more strategically aware of his non-role in the story and how, like in the anime, he stopped being an important character after like 3 episodes. Bet knows who he is, and they know that the audience finds him intrinsically less interesting than Yumiko, so I want to say Ryan actually works a lot better than Ryota just in terms of the show knowing how to use him and giving him a good place to exist while not overstepping his role. On the flip side, on the audience reaction, there was a lot of weird both ways backlash to the character being black, with racists on the right offended that black people exist, and people on the far left also offended that a majority of Ryota's storyline consists of him being a slave, which is now super awkward because the character is black. So I guess you're saying black people can't be slaves? Is that so dumb it's racist, or so racist it's brilliant? Either way, I don't want to talk about it, so leave me more in the comments. Do you think that's racist? Let me know. Mary Satome became Mary Davis. I think the actress does a fine job, and I'm okay with this presentation of Mary in the show, that she's more of a straightforward bully villain in this one, and she was always a big bad guy in the original show, just not like the main evil character. She's kind of big bone in this one, and that's another debate point. I guess I'm okay with it because Mary never like intrinsically uses her sex appeal in the original show. Almost all the race swaps in the show are kind of controversial, and literally every character except Yumiko is race swap, so it's like not worth discussing it for literally every single character. It's just like, fuck you all. Characters are different. Kira Momobami became Kira Tumarov. Once again, pretty different character from the original. She's now the pompous daughter of a mafioso family, and what the fuck is up with that black hair? You really couldn't find a single blonde person in all of America. It really throws off her overall ice cream Elsa vibe of the original, and I guess I'd just be more cool with this character if they just dyed her hair blonde or gave her a wig in the second season. Getting the hair color wrong just seems like a damning oversight of a move for something so simple. And I feel like I have to mention that I'm shocked at how many blonde characters are in the Japanese version of this show versus the American version not having any, despite the fact that blonde human beings actually occur naturally in America and not Japan. Anyway, enough about that. Hunter Cardinal plays Michael, who's either a new character or an extremely bad adaptation of random man with the glasses from the anime, Kaede Mayuda. He's kind of just a red herring character to give Ryan another guy to talk to. I guess this character is okay. He's slightly more interesting than Kaede in the story anyway. Dorian Giordano plays Chad White. People online think this character is also an adaptation of Kaede. I'm going to disagree with that because I feel like Hunter was closer to Kaede, but I honestly don't remember this character at all, and I just finished watching the show. Laura Afelsky plays Runa von Ludwig, a very weird adaptation of weird old Runa Yomizuki. I love her as an actress. I think she did a great job. I'm a little concerned though that from a writing perspective, they gave her nothing to do aside from wearing weird costumes. And some of the costumes got maybe a little bit too weird. It kind of feels like they were fishing for Easter eggs with her. I hope in the next season this character gets more screen time because in season 1 she just chews the scenery and acts as a really weird background character. But I did like her. And when O'Driscoll plays both Riri Tumarov and Wendy. I guess I overall like her as an actor because Wendy was fucking awesome. Riri, though, kind of a mess. I didn't like the weird ninja COVID mask thing, and they absolutely butchered the vibes of the original Shy Girl monolith that was Ririka. Wendy is supposedly then an adaptation of Sayaka Igarashi, but I really didn't see or feel that. It just seems like she's a weird nerd character who, like, runs things secretly behind the walls. I guess she seems a lot weirder than Sayaka, so it seems like she's her own character. They also gave her this really bizarre montage where she bonds with Yumiko, and I'm not really sure what to take of that. So once again, rare example of the show discarding the source material, but somehow succeeding despite that. The Beaver is a very strange new character that they added to the new show. The big stupid twist at the end of the show is he turns out to be wrestler Seth Rollins, and it was a really dumb twist that made no sense. They probably couldn't afford to get John Cena because he's on Peacemaker right now. But yeah, it's a dumb twist and it's maybe too dumb. They don't really explain it, and so it just reminds me of like the fourth wall break in Gremlins 2 where Hulk Hogan is suddenly there. In full context, I guess the story is one of the kids paid Seth Rollins millions of dollars to live on campus in a beaver costume for the sake of terrorizing these rich children. I do hope the Beaver comes back next season and it's just fully retconned that none of that happened, that he wasn't Seth Rollins. They could just fully play the mystery all over again and write the Seth Rollins thing off as a joke or a hallucination or just he was a second Beaver. But yeah, otherwise I enjoyed the Beaver as another chaotic piece of the puzzle and another place where Bet went off the rails and did its own thing. So finally, the character of Itsuki Tsukumagi was butchered to create Suki the gay stereotype. And this is potentially one of the worst changes in the series, but let's see if I overall rank this higher or lower than how pissed off I am about Midori. Netflix Cowboy Bebop was pretty harshly criticized for taking the character of Dren, who was a bigendered war veteran with a hormone imbalance and had very serious gender dysphoria issues, and they just completely butchered him and turned him into an extremely watered down, extremely sad gay stereotype. And this show basically does the same thing by ruining the character of Itsuki, who was probably and very sadly the girliest girl on this girl show where most of the characters are girls. Instead, in the show, she's a boy, and they twisted her into Suki, a strange gay stereotype who fakes his death and just comes back more evil and more gay. I don't like this character at all because it's pretty much your token gay villain at odds with a sassy female hero. Now, I do kind of enjoy that trope every once in a while when it's done right, but here it's done extremely tastelessly. There are places where they could try to make him like a human being, and they choose not to. They just make him a punching bag of jokes, and they make him completely insufferable. And I don't know if it's intentional or not, but it also seems like in some places he's a direct parody of Boy George. Boy George, you should sue this show. While I'm disappointed in Suki existing, I feel like I'm more mad at Itsuki not existing because these characters are so completely different that why? The only thing they have in common is they gave Suki Itsuki's gross random fingernail collecting storyline for one episode. Aside from that, the characters are so different that I feel like they could introduce manga accurate Itsuki in season 2, and it would honestly be interesting because that character, for all extents and purposes, does not exist in the show right now. They won't, but the characters are so different they really could do it because they literally have nothing in common. I'll also mention that Suki has a weird gay boyfriend, follower, dogman-made person named Rex, played by Rami Khan. A lot of people were concerned he was ruined at first, but I want to say he's not, although he does steal some of her scenes and energy. I think overall I like Rex more than Suki. Since he's not pure evil, I can forgive him. Anyway, the show needs to work on its gay representation because all these gay characters are presented as evil, treacherous psychopaths, so that's your message for Pride Month. Gay people exist, but they're all crazy and they're all going to kill you, and if they don't immediately get what they want, they'll fake their deaths. And that's a big problem with the show. Okay, so this is probably the worst character on the show, Dori Armstrong, adapted from Midori Ikishima. So, the original Midori in Kakegurui was basically the show's Joker, a character pushed to the point of self-mutilation who had completely lost touch with both her own humanity, her own morality, and was basically willing to fuck over anyone for any particular reason. And for that reason, I would argue that she's the second most interesting character on the original Kakegurui, behind only Yumiko. And she's a distinctive foil for Yumiko, as they're both fundamentally psychopaths who have fucked around a lot and never really found out. Okay, maybe Midori found out when she lost her eyeball, but she still doesn't really care, and that's not stopping her. Now, Bet's Americanized version of the character is, in one word, pathetic. Actually, it's occurring to me like, remember that old meme about how villains can't be attractive on American cartoons? It feels like that meme is being carried out to the extreme on this show, since the original show was like a bunch of hot girls fighting over gambling games, and this adaptation is just a single hot girl fighting a series of escalatingly evil, ugly inside and out monster people. Now, Dori is a disaster. Instead of being a fucking psychopath, instead of being a real threat, she's just a joke disaster of a character who acts kind of like a pirate, brandishes a sword, and does a lot of cliches ripped out of Scott Pilgrim. The only thing that tied her to Midori at all was her loss of an eye, which is later retconned and undercut by some bullshit that it's actually a fake eye patch that is some sort of eye patch smartphone TV that her mad scientist parents made her and got her addicted to, and now she refuses to take it off. It's not even like it's a cool high-tech cheating device, it's just a weird addictive little toy thing that she won't take off her eyeball. What the fuck is that? She is probably the worst character in this adaptation because I don't think the writers understood who Midori was, and I'm kind of mad about this because Midori was basically Yumiko's greatest foe, the only foe you couldn't predict, the only foe that was really a match for her, and in Bet, Dori is just this fucking brute enforcer of a main villain, so the villains have a heavy. Oh god, I just had a horrible realization. Dori in the show is Bane. But not like the version of Bane that everyone likes, the version of Bane that's around now. Like the first live-action adaptation of Bane from the movie Batman and Robin, where queer old Joel Schumacher had zero respect for this character and didn't know who he was and just assumed he was some kind of a zombie wrestler. This pretty much feels like what happened here. The showrunners did not watch the show, they didn't know who Midori Ikishima was, and they just assumed she was some sort of zombie wrestler. That pretty much is the only conclusion I can come to here, that they just didn't watch the show they were adapting and assumed this character with the eye patch was a zombie wrestler. Anyway, so that's basically it for the main cast, but I'm not done because probably the last thing I need to talk about that the show does overall fuck up is the basic episode structure of Kakegurui, which is kind of an amazing accomplishment since that should have been the easy part. Kakegurui is a show where people play games And while they're playing the games, details about the background of what's going on is slowly revealed. But Bet doesn't do that. It makes it more of a straightforward high school drama show where at the climax of every episode, they play a game for like 5 or 10 minutes. Unfortunately, because they don't give enough attention to the gambling games, not all of them work. I feel like they don't focus on them hard enough, and that therefore doesn't make the gambling just the same level of compelling that it was in the original show. The episodes of Bet are also a little bit too short. They're only a half hour long, and that's kind of a double-edged sword. While it did make the show an easy binge, it made the drama compact, it made it easy to follow, I do need to say that it really fucks up the engagement levels for any of the death games. None of the death games are two-parters, they're all done in under 5 minutes, and after binging the show, the only one I can directly remember was the Mary Saltame finger death trap game because Mary cut her own fucking finger off. They really went there with that one. That was fucking cool. I also barely remember the time Dory did DDR against Yumiko because that was fucking dumb and it didn't follow the real laws of DDR. So that was another low point in the show. All right, I guess that's everything I have to complain about for Bet. I am overall going to say it's more deserving of a watch than either the Japanese live-action Kakegurui or the Netflix Cowboy Bebop, and it honestly does give me hope that in the second season, if they push farther off the rails, if they just take Yumiko to Las Vegas and do a heist movie, this show could work. But instead, meanwhile, it seems like the creators are in this weird, tangential Schrodinger's box where they don't seem like they're interested in doing a faithful adaptation of Kakegurui, and so fuck it. Just don't. Let Yumiko run free in America. That's literally how the show ends, by the way. Yumiko runs off somewhere into the American countryside like she's fucking Bigfoot. I guess this show is still a horrible adaptation, but it's not so horrible that it's unwatchable. It's just horrible that I have to wonder what they're doing and what they're trying to achieve here, because they're not achieving Kakegurui, but they are achieving Yumiko Jabami. So just send Yumiko Jabami somewhere interesting. That's all I have to say about this. Let me know if you checked out the show and let me know what you thought about it. It's a very controversial show, I guess. All right, good night, everybody.